welcome to my channel. My name is Maddie, and today I will be sharing the books that I read in December. So in December, I read 10 books, which is awesome. That's more than I remember reading in a month back when I was like really actively reading. That's great. 3 of them were manga that I read in one day because they're super short and quick to get through, but still 10 books is a lot, and I'm really happy about that. So let's just get started. So I continued my reread of the Black Dagger Brotherhood series by J.R. Ward with Lover Awaken. In this one we follow 𝑍𝑒𝑑𝑒𝑠, which is another member of the Black Dagger Brotherhood, and basic premise for these books in case you don't know. Let's get into that first. So this book is a vampire series that follows members of this brotherhood, which is the Black Dagger Brotherhood, and this group is tasked with protecting the vampire race from these vampire slayers called lesser, and so that's basically their job. And 𝑍𝑒𝑑𝑒𝑠 is, like I said, one of the members of this brotherhood. He has actually been probably the most interesting character of this brotherhood because he's the most frightening. Everyone knows him as super scary. Whenever he's in the room, everyone is like really terrified of him. Even some members of the brotherhood are terrified of him. So he's just been very interesting, and I've been wanting to know a lot more about him, which we get to know a lot more about him in this book. And we also follow Bella, who is his love interest, and she initially sees 𝑍𝑒𝑑𝑒𝑠 as someone more than what he appeared. She is intimidated by 𝑍𝑒𝑑𝑒𝑠 at first, like everyone is, but she starts to see him for who he is, like beyond his scary exterior. And 𝑍𝑒𝑑𝑒𝑠 has a hard time letting Bella in and allowing himself to love her because he feels like he's very undeserving of love and feels like he doesn't deserve her at all, which is incredibly sad. But Bella persists and she wants to be with him, and so yeah, this is pretty much their love story. 𝑍𝑒𝑑𝑒𝑠 has such a brutal backstory. I want to say definitely, at least so far, because I've only read the first 6 books in the series, this is the darkest book of the series so far. Like, your stomach will be churning throughout a lot of this book. There's a lot of trigger warnings that go into this book involving, you know, essay, abuse, a lot of things, the terrible things that just happened to 𝑍𝑒𝑑𝑒𝑠 you'll know about in this book. So definitely do stay away from this book if those are things that bother you, because they are heavily present in this book. But yeah, his backstory it's terrible. It's so terrible. There's a lot of times where I cried because it's the things he had to go through. Like, even thinking about it now, the things he had to go through, like, it was so disgusting how he was treated in his past. One thing I do love about this book is how, in regards to the essay, how we see an example of a male going through that, which is something you don't see a lot in books. You don't see a lot of male characters going through that kind of assault. It's just something you don't really hear about a lot, and I really love how this book gave an example of that. I think it's so important to recognize that that's something that men go through too. It's more common to recognize that that's something women go through, but men do experience it. And sadly, I know, like, it's kind of been proven that a lot of men don't come forward with it because they're embarrassed to, which is so sad, because their stories deserve to get told. They deserve to feel validated in what they went through. And so I really love how this book gave an example of a male who did go through something like that. I think that's so impactful and it's so important. I love watching him grow into his feelings towards Bella and him falling in love with her, even though he feels like he doesn't deserve her, because he has so much self-hatred. But Bella really persisted with 𝑍𝑒𝑑𝑒𝑠. She was not going to let him go, and, you know, obviously he eventually gives in and they really do fall for each other. And it's such a sweet romance. The one thing I didn't love about this one is that I feel like the romantic plot line did kind of get lost at the end. There was a lot going on at the end of the book to where I kind of forgot all about 𝑍𝑒𝑑𝑒𝑠 and Bella. Like, it just kind of got lost in the plot line, so that kind of was something I did not like that much. I felt like the romance and everything else that was going on in the book started to become unbalanced. And another thing, you know, I want to say this is something I don't like about the book, but I don't like it because it was so, you know, sad. This book has the saddest ending so far in these books. Oh my god, the ending, I was bawling. I could not believe what happened at the end of this book. It was so incredibly sad. Like, it's even thinking about it now, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna cry again, because it was so terrible. Definitely the saddest ending of this series so far. This one I gave 4 out of 5 stars. It was very good. Like I said in my last video, these books just get better and better, and I'm so excited to keep on reading them. All right, next one. What is it? Out of all my recent reads, this is the worst book I've read recently. I did not like this one, sadly. That is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. So this one is about Olive and Ethan, and their siblings are getting married. The book starts off with their siblings' wedding, and at the reception for their wedding, all of the guests get food poisoning. Due to the fact that the buffet at the wedding, there was something in the food that made them get food poisoning, like the food was bad or something. But Olive and Ethan are the only 2 people at this wedding that did not eat anything from the buffet. And so their siblings can't go on their honeymoon because they're sick, but their trip is non-refundable and they would hate for it to go to waste. So because Olive and Ethan are the only 2 people from the wedding party that didn't get sick, they're like, hey, why don't you guys go on our honeymoon so it doesn't go to waste? But the thing is, though, that Olive and Ethan actually hate each other. There's something that happened between them in their past. I'm rolling my eyes because I'll go over it later. That made it to where they don't like each other. So it's very awkward for them to go on a honeymoon together where they have to be like alone together. But they're like, we can't pass up an opportunity to go to Maui, Hawaii, because that's where the honeymoon is. So they go together, and as they spend more time together, they kind of fall out of hating each other and start to like each other more. So this one is a enemies to lovers romance, which I am a big fan of enemies to lovers romances. I love that trope so much. But this book, sadly, it did not work for me. Y'all, I was so disappointed in this book. This book has been so hyped up for the longest time, and it just did not do it for me, and I will go through my reasons. I have a lot of them. So this book actually started off really strong. I was really into the beginning of it. I was really liking the characters so far. I was into, you know, where it was going and all that. But the minute Olive and Ethan took off on their honeymoon, you know, on this trip, that's when the book started to go downhill. I just did not feel the romantic chemistry between these 2 at all. They went from hating each other to liking each other way too quickly. There was no gradual progression of them going from enemies to lovers at all. It just felt so sudden. Basically, Olive's reasoning for liking him is because she just started to think about how good he looks. Like, he's really attractive. And because she was starting to become physically attracted to him, she started falling in love with him, which is really weird because she hated him so much. It was just so sudden. And what I like with my enemies to lovers romances, I like them to be a gradual process of them going from hate to love. When it's too sudden, it just feels very unrealistic, and it makes no sense. And there were sex scenes in this book. They weren't overly spicy though, but that's the problem I had with it, because you get to hear about what happened in these scenes after the fact, but the actual sex scenes are fade to black, and I found that really weird. It's like this book wanted to be tame, but it also wanted to be spicy, and there was no balance between the 2. It's like, pick what you want to be. Do you want to be more spicy, or do you want to be more tame? You have to have one or the other. You can't just be in the middle. It just makes it very odd. The sex scenes in this book was so odd because it read like it was trying to be tame, but it would have worked better if it was more, you know, had more detail. It just was very odd. Third act conflict was so stupid because it didn't even involve them. It involved their siblings, and somehow they made it about them. It was so stupid. They got into a whole fight over it, when I'm like, y'all, this does not involve you. Why are you letting it wreck your relationship? It was so weird. And specifically regarding third act conflict, which doesn't even involve them, Olive keeps something from her sister, which her sister deserved to know, but she keeps it from her sister for basically no reason. Y'all, if my brother were to keep something like this from me, I would be pissed. And my brother would never do something like that. A sibling would never keep information like that from someone, unless they hated them, of course. But Olive and her sister have such a great relationship. Like, it doesn't make sense that she would keep this from her, but she does. And I'm like, that made her such a crappy sister and a crappy person overall. Like, why would you do that to someone? That's such a terrible thing to do. It definitely did not make her likable at all. And Ethan encouraged her to keep this from her sister, which made me also not like him. Like, are we supposed to root for these characters? Are we supposed to like them? Because they started to become so unlikable so fast from keeping secrets from other characters. It just made them, like, really shitty people. Like, it made me really not like them. And like I mentioned kind of earlier, the reason these two hate each other is it's so stupid. I'm just gonna mention the reason why they hate each other. So, Olive basically hated Ethan because he looked at her the wrong way. I'm not even kidding. The way he looked at her made her hate him. And Ethan, in turn, didn't like Olive because she was treating him badly because of the way he looked at her. That's why they don't like each other. That is such a stupid reason to hate each other, because that's something you could easily talk over right away. Like, if they would have just talked it out, they could have solved this issue so quickly years ago. Like, these two characters, they're in their 30s. They act like they are 10 years old. They act like children. I'm like, adults don't act this way. I could not believe these two were in their 30s. It was so bizarre. Oh my god. I really did not like this. I'm so sad I didn't like this. I read Beautiful Bastard by Christina Lauren years ago, and that book I think I gave 3 out of 5 stars. It was a mediocre read, and this one I just hated. I'm just kind of starting to think their books aren't for me at all. They just do not work for me, so I can't see myself picking up another book from them again, because 2 other books I didn't love. One I thought was mediocre. This one I just really didn't like. So yeah, I'm thinking they're not for me. I'm really sad I didn't like this, because I know a lot of people who love this book, but it was a disappointment. It really irritated me. I hated the characters. The only reason I'm giving it 2 stars is because the beginning was okay, but the rest of it sucked bad. So I personally would not recommend, and I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. We've got a little cameo from Deku. He wanted cuddles. He's so sweet. Yes, we love you, huh? We love kitties here. We can always use a kitty cameo, huh? I wonder if I can continue to film here and hold him at the same time, because I don't want to put him down. I guess I could try. So the next books I reread Fruits Basket Another, and I reread these in preparation for the 4th volume. And Fruits Basket Another, if you don't know, is the spin-off series to Fruits Basket, which the books are right here. It's the spin-off series to that series. And this series follows the characters from Fruits Basket's children. That was a very weird way to say it. It follows the next generation of the characters from the Fruits Basket series. It follows the characters from Fruits Basket's children. Let's go with that. And in Fruits Basket Another, we're introduced to a new character from the series, and that is Sawa. And she's someone who is very timid. She has a lot of lack of self-confidence. She has a lot of family issues, struggling with her relationship with her mother. So she's just going through a lot. And so the whole series of Fruits Basket Another just follows the kids from the Soma family and them helping her through it and becoming friends with her. It's super, super sweet. I think Fruits Basket Another isn't as emotionally deep as Fruits Basket is, but it's still very, very good. And so I read the first 3 volumes so I can prepare myself for the 4th volume. And so I read the 4th volume, and I have a bone to pick with the 4th volume. So in the 4th volume, there is barely any content about Fruits Basket Another. Basically, the 4th volume is a compilation of the 3 Musketeers arc, which is another spin-off kind of like mini-series from Fruits Basket. And it also contains the manga short content that was in the Japanese release of the Blu-rays of the anime. And then there's like chapter 13 from Fruits Basket Another, and then another short like mini chapter from Fruits Basket Another at the end of it. That's it. The marketing for the 4th volume was so odd because there's barely any Fruits Basket Another content in it at all. Like chapter 13, which is in this volume, came out, I want to say a year ago, and I had already read it way back then, and so I already read chapter 13, and that's like pretty much the primary content from Fruits Basket and Another that is in this volume. And then the rest is like the Three Musketeers arc and the bonus chapters from the Blu-ray releases. Why is this marketed as Fruits Basket and Another content? There's no Fruits Basket and Another material really in there except for one chapter. It's so odd. So I basically read these in preparation for the fourth volume for nothing, which is fine because I'll always be happy to reread any Fruits Basket content. Like, I was happy to reread these, so I'm not mad that I reread these at all. But like, I was so looking forward to volume 4 when there's like not any Fruits Basket and Other content in it at all. So I gotta say, the marketing on this volume, I want to know what, you know, I want to say like the publishers were thinking about this one. The good thing about this volume is that it did finally move me to pick up the Three Musketeers arc, which follows Shigure, Hattori, and Ayame. And that whole spin-off little series is just about them kind of recounting what happened in the series and also kind of promoting the anime. That feels so weird to say. Basically, that whole spin-off series is them promoting the anime. I'm not even kidding. It was so bizarre. Like, there was so much fourth wall breaking in that series. Basically, that spin-off series is just a whole ad for the anime. It is so weird. I was like, what? Why did I read this? It was such a bizarre experience. Also, you know, Shigure, Hattori, and Ayame aren't my favorite characters from the series. Like, there are things I do love about them, but the reason I wasn't motivated to pick up the Three Musketeers arc is because they aren't my favorite characters. So I was like, I'm not like feel that inclined to pick these up, but I did because it's Fruits Basket, finally, because they were in this volume. I would recommend not even wasting your time on the Three Musketeers arc. Unless you love Shigure, Hattori, and Ayame, then yeah, if you'd like to, definitely go ahead because they are the prominent characters from that spin-off series, but it was pretty much useless. The only chapter I liked from that series is the one where they kind of contemplate whether, I won't say who the characters are because I don't want to spoil, but whether a certain couple kind of did the deed because it's super funny. That's the only chapter I liked, but other than that, there wasn't nothing kind of notable about that series. But what I did like about this volume is that it did include the bonus chapters from the Japanese Blu-ray release of the anime, which us Westerners didn't get to see, and it's finally been translated. I think that's so cool. Basically, these series is kind of extra scenes from previous chapters from the manga, which is kind of neat. Like, they're all fluff, they all aren't necessary, but they're really cool. It's really cool to see these characters and like extra scenes about them. I like that. But yeah, this one was disappointing. I actually gave it 3 out of 5 stars because I was so disappointed in it, which is so weird for Fruits Basket because every volume I can remember from Fruits Basket is like a 4 or 5 star read for me, but this one is like 3 stars because the marketing was so off. But I mean, I still to some extent enjoyed reading it because it is Fruits Basket. So there's that, at least. Next, I picked up a completely new to me author. I wanted to, you know, read an author that I had never read before, and I also was in the mood for kind of like a spicy romance. So I picked up Praise by Sarah Kate. So this one is the first book in a series, and this whole series, the premise of it is that it revolves around this club that the guy Emerson from the first book starts. And this club is, it's a sex club. But the main target audience for this club is people who have certain, like, kinks that they need to get out. And basically this club is just an environment for them to feel free to, like, explore those kinks and find other people who are into the same things that they are and them to freely express and do those stuff there. So in the first book, we follow Emerson, who is the club owner, and this girl named Charlotte. And Charlotte is someone who doesn't have a lot of sexual experience at all, but as she meets Emerson and comes to know more about this club, she kind of grows into being more, how do you put it? I want to say promiscuous, but that's kind of not the right word. I guess grows into being more sexual, like We'll just put it like that. And so the book starts out with her leaving her ex-boyfriend. She's moving out of his house, and she goes to her ex asking for the deposit money for the apartment that they were renting. And her ex says that his dad has the deposit money because her dad was the one who like handled the, you know, renting and leasing of the house and all that. So she has to go to his dad in order to get the deposit money. I'm now realizing how like convoluted and long the synopsis is. So basically her ex's dad, who is also the club owner, he is someone who likes being dominant, and he likes having a submissive with him at all times. And his last submissive, he fired her, and so he's looking for a new one. And so when Charlotte goes into his office to ask for the deposit money, when she gets there, he thinks that he's the next submissive that was hired for him. So this is like the funniest part of the book. So when he goes to meet her, he tells her to get on her knees, and you know, she kind of complies and starts doing the whole submissive thing for him because that's what he thinks she's there for. And she's kind of like, okay, I guess I'll do this. And so it's so funny. It's so funny saying this out loud. And so it does come to light, you know, upon first meeting her. He finally realizes like, oh wait, she's not here for this. She's here for the deposit money. She's my son's ex-girlfriend. And so the story goes from there. Emerson and her start off this, you know, complicated relationship. They do grow feelings for each other, which makes it really hard because this is his son's ex-girlfriend, and he is 40 and she is 21, so there's a huge age gap. And yeah, that's basically what it's all about. The premise definitely did get me and intrigue me to read this book, because when I first heard of that premise, I was like, oh my god, that's so hilarious. That's so mortifying. Can you even imagine? Like mistaking your son's ex-girlfriend for your submissive because she came to get the deposit money. It's even funnier because she's there for money, and she initially says, hey, I'm here to get the money, and he's like, oh yeah, you're here to get money because I'm paying you to be my submissive. It's so bizarre and so funny. So like I also mentioned in the synopsis, this book has a big thing of growing into your sexuality, which I love. I love when books explore that sort of thing, because I think that's a thing that's like really important, because it's something that everyone should, if they so desire to, should feel comfortable expressing and not feeling embarrassed about. And I really loved how that was a big thing of this book, of not being embarrassed from wanting to be like more sexual. I love that about it so much. And so Charlotte, she starts off as someone who is like very tame, who isn't into that sort of thing, but grows into becoming more like that as she develops her relationship with Emerson, which I love. I love that sort of development. However, I wish we would have seen her as she was before she grew into being more of like a sexual person. I feel like we didn't really get to see enough of that. The before was more told than shown. And I would have loved to have seen her before, when she was more tame and she wasn't comfortable expressing her sexuality at all. But we don't get that. We're just kind of told that. And I think that kind of like ruins the whole development thing, because the development would have been more impactful if we had seen her more like that before. And we just don't kind of get that. The romance is surprisingly sweet, given the nature of how Emerson is. Like, he's a dominant person. He's into the dominant and submissive relationship, but he's very sweet with her. And so Charlotte actually eventually does become his submissive because she wants to be in that role. And the reason she does it, it's really sad why she does it, is that with her ex-boyfriend, she was treated pretty poorly by him. He didn't really value her, and he kind of like wrote her off a lot, just didn't really like treasure her and really took her for granted, and she felt so underappreciated by him. But because being a submissive means that, you know, the dominant is always praising the submissive, she kind of craves that praise, hence the title of this book. Like, she wants to be praised and feel valued, and because she's the submissive to Emerson, she's able to feel valued by him, which makes it very, very heartbreaking. Like, I never thought I would feel heartbreak in regards to a dominant and submissive relationship that way, but creates such a sad feeling in regards to the relationship that they have. I do feel like the sex scenes got a little much, and I feel weird for saying that because, I mean, going into this book, you know what you're getting into, but I do feel like they got a little repetitive, and sometimes like, okay, do we really need to read about them doing this again? But it was fine. I can't complain much because it's erotica pretty much, so can't complain too much about that. But other than that, this book, it was pretty good. I did really, really like it. And I will be reading the rest of the books in this series. Can't wait for that. I did give this one 4 out of 5 stars. And next, I read Darius by J.R. Ward. This is book .5 from the Black Dagger Brotherhood series. And this book specifically is all about Darius. This isn't a spoiler, by the way, because it happens so early on in the first book. But Darius does die in the beginning of the first book. So he's a character that we don't really see a lot because he dies so early on. So it was really nice to see more of him in this book. And Darius is Beth, who is the main character from the first book. This is her father. And so this book goes over his relationship with also Beth's mother, Anne. And Anne was a human. So that kind of made their relationship difficult, of course, because he's a vampire. But he falls in love with her. They have a falling out that happens, and Anne becomes pregnant with Beth, which is something Darius finds out later on at the end of the book. This is a short book. I think it constitutes as a novella, actually, so it is a novella. And this one is exclusively audiobook. There is no actual novel, physical novel for this book. It is only available on audiobook, and that was actually really, really disappointing to me, and is actually the primary reason why I rated this 3 out of 5 stars. I don't like listening to audiobooks at all, because audiobooks are so hard for me to pay attention to. I will zone out during audiobooks, whether I'm liking the book or not. I will zone out, and I found myself zoning out with this audiobook a lot because I just don't like audiobooks. It's really hard for me to pay attention to them. I really would have preferred having this book in physical form, and I've actually never heard of a book only being available in an audiobook. That's really, really weird. I wonder why that was. So unfortunately, having this only be an audiobook was kind of the reason why I rated it lower than I probably would have if it was in physical form, because there were parts where I just couldn't pay attention because I was zoning out while listening to it. However, I did love hearing about Darius's backstory. Like I said, he's a character that dies very early on in the series, like within the first 2 chapters of the first book, so you barely get to know a lot about him. You only get to hear about him from the other characters in the book, so it was really cool just getting his point of view and learning a lot more about him. He's a very sweet guy. It's very unfortunate that he died. And Anne dies too, which again isn't a spoiler because you find out early on in the first book, but she died giving birth to Beth. And I did love the romance. I thought it was very, very sweet. Not amazing, but just sweet. I thought it was good. I will say though, even though this is book 0.5 in the series, I would recommend not to read it until after, I think it's the 21st book in the series. This audiobook was actually released in summer of last year. So there's some things that I feel like were kind of spoilery for the rest of the books. Like, not huge things, but definitely things that I would have rather not known because I hadn't gotten to later books in the series yet. I kind of wish I would have waited this one out and read it after the 21st book. I don't know why it's book 0.5. There's some things that are kind of spoilery in it. I think that's very, very weird because usually a prequel book is not supposed to go over things that happen in later books, so you should feel comfortable reading a prequel book because it shouldn't have any spoilers in it for the rest of the books in the series. So if you're reading the series late like me, I'd recommend to wait off listening to this audiobook until you've really caught up with the series. But yeah, I give it 3 out of 5 stars. Would have loved it more if it wasn't an audiobook, but it was still pretty good. And the last 2 books I read this month are also part of the Black Dagger Brotherhood series. So I continued on with book 4, which is Lover Revealed. So this book I was really excited for because this one follows Butch and Marissa. And I love these 2 characters, and I love their relationship. Their relationship has been progressing, or I want to say it's been degressing in these books. They started off in the first book really liking each other, but then they had a falling out. And so in this book, they're still recovering from that falling out, but they also reunite and their feelings for each other grow again. And so Butch is a human and Marissa is a vampire. Butch actually, I didn't love him at first. He's always been a prominent character in this series. I didn't love him, but I didn't dislike him either. He was just kind of like, okay with me. But he really grew on me in this book. I really ended up liking him. He's always been this character who has a very tough exterior. He's a former cop, so, you know, he's very, very tough. But he actually proves to be very sweet and really loyal, which is great traits to have. And I really liked unraveling more of his character in this book and getting to the deep down of who he actually is. And Butch is a human, but he actually is sort of part of the Black Dagger Brotherhood. And one thing I've loved about this series is seeing the guys in this brotherhood really grow to love Butch, because, you know, they've always been not really pro-human and getting involved with humans. So it was really cool to see them like have a human as their friend. It was very sweet. And Marissa is so relatable. Oh my god. So painfully relatable, because she's someone who has never like fit in. She's a part of the vampire aristocracy, and she's always been kind of like an outcast. Even though she's part of like the social class, she's seen by other vampires in her class as like very like unworthy and just kind of overlooked. And she also feels the pain of being like single, because so many of the vampires in the aristocracy are together, and there's so many couples, and she's just like, I'm just over here like being overlooked, and I'm so painfully single. And I'm like, God, I relate to that so much. Like, she was just so relatable in that regard, which is really sad. I love the relationship that Butch and Marissa have. Like I said, it starts off like them really liking each other in the first book. Gradually, like, they fall out. They kind of have a misunderstanding as well between each other. But in this book, they grow to love each other again, and it's so great. They are just perfect for each other. Butch treats her so well, treats her in the way she deserves, because like I said, she was so overlooked and just treated so poorly by other vampires, but he actually values her. He sees who she really is, and he just treasures her, and it's so sweet to see. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed it. One of my favorites in the series so far. This one has a lot of twists, especially regarding Butch. I was so shook by like the last 200 pages of this book and what happened with him. It's a lot, and it's really good. Then I read Lover Unbound, which is the 5th book of the Black Dagger Brotherhood series, and in this one we follow another member of the Black Dagger Brotherhood, and that is Vicious, who is another character like Butch who I liked, but I just wasn't like super invested in. But this book made me love him so much more. So Vicious is actually someone who's not really interested in love. He likes, you know, casual stuff, but he's not really into the whole love thing. He's actually kind of like 𝑍. He's very dangerous and kind of scary. They had the similar vibe. But he meets this human who is Jane, and she really softens him. He really starts to fall for her, and it's basically their whole romance. I really started to feel for Vicious because of his backstory. Just like 𝑍, his backstory is so horrible. He goes through a lot of abuse in his childhood, which he did not deserve. His father was someone who kind of just like beat him up for no good reason. He just did not deserve it, and I really felt for him and everything he went through. And pertaining to Vicious, he has a whole plot twist regarding his character that blew my mind. Oh my god, I was not expecting it, and it happens pretty early on in the book, but it made his character so much more interesting. I feel like him and Jane understand the hardships and what they each went through and helped them deal with it. Jane went through a lot with her family, and her family often treated her in a way she didn't deserve, which is something that they could both relate on because they both went through similar things in that aspect. And I feel like the progression of their romance was done so well. It was so perfectly paced. I do think so far this is the best romance in the whole series. I loved it. I loved the way it unraveled. It felt natural. I felt their chemistry right off the bat. It was so well done. The ending was such a roller coaster of emotions. It's very dramatic. A lot happens at the end, but I was all for it. And in the last chapter of the book, Vicious does something that is so incredibly sweet. It actually made me cry. It was such a beautiful and just kind thing for him to do. And for a character who's known to be so malicious, for him to do something so sweet and kind was such a huge development for him. His character just evolves so much in this book, and it's so incredible to see. So I love this one. I also gave it 5 out of 5 stars. One of my favorite books in this series. It's on par with Lover Revealed, the 4th book that I just mentioned. I can't even choose between these two. Like, I think these two are my favorite books of the series so far. Like, they're both equally amazing. So those are all the books I read in December. 10 books. Not bad. Hopefully I can keep up with that momentum, but we'll just see. We'll see how 2023 goes. Hopefully I read a lot of books this year, but we'll just see. My goal is to read 50 books in 2023, and I think I can do it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like this video, because that helps me a lot to grow my channel and all that. I'm still working on my outros and stuff. I'm not in the swing of things when it comes to making videos anymore, so I'm kind of getting into my groove. But I'll say the basics. Yes, like, comment on the video. That also helps the channel a lot. And subscribe, because I'd love to have you around, and I'll be putting out more book-related videos in the future. So, again, thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all really soon. Bye!